Greetings to you on the Ruslan Belov channel, and here is your daily review of military operations from the Ukrainian Theatre of Operations. Before we begin, I would like to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your support contributes to its growth. Huge gratitude to everyone who has already subscribed. Yesterday, Siversk made a speech. He made quite a few remarkable statements. In particular, it turned out that the Ukrainian armed forces supposedly continue to hold Pokrovsk, specifically its southwestern districts. But the most significant was his assertion about the absence of any territorial compromises on Ukraine's side. That ending and opening the negotiation process should, in the optimal scenario, be exclusively along the current front line. Such declarations, as well as Umarov's words about an imminent signing of an agreement, naturally are complete nonsense. No agreement will be reached with such a stubborn position from the Ukrainian side, of course, since Russia's demands are well known and it clearly does not intend to abandon them. Well, military operations on the front continue, and we continue to analyze the situation. So, comrades, the offensive operations of Russian forces do not stop for a single day. Everyone has already gotten used to this, but just think about the fact that daily, literally every day, Ukraine loses not just territory, but tens of square kilometers. We'll begin today's review from the northern sectors. Regarding the Sumy region, there's not much to say yet. Although, according to data from the North grouping, and there are no reasons not to trust them, advancement is recorded here. Just without details at the moment, but soon I believe video materials will appear and we'll be able to analyze the advancement. But where we reliably know about the advancement of our fighters, this is the Vovchansk sector. Although after the capture of Vovchansk, it's probably already incorrect to call this the Vovchansk direction. The city is under absolute Russian control, unlike Kupiansk, and this fact is confirmed including by Western media. It's clear that the Ukrainian side will deny this until the last possibility, and only after a month or two will acknowledge the loss of the city. So, here advancement was recorded in the settlement of Lyman. Military personnel of the North grouping advanced in the residential quarters of the village by another 450 meters. The position of the armed forces of Ukraine is rapidly deteriorating, and everything indicates that they will not be able to hold the village. And what are the objectives specifically in this sector? In Vovcha, the goal is clear: establish control over the urban-type settlement and then push the AFU 7 kilometers south to the line Losevka, Ukrainskoye, Bely Kolodez. But here the objective is different. After taking Lyman, the goal will be to clear the entire territory along the Siversk Donets. That is to consolidate approximately like this: Prilipka, then Gravsko, then Verkhnaya Pisarevka, and then along the Pilnaya River to Losevka. And so that this entire sector is cleared, which in conjunction with parallel advancement from Vovcha south to Bely Kolodez will provide an excellent opportunity to then advance toward Veliki Burluk. Such is the medium-term goal. This, I believe, is the place where we will see the line of combat contact probably in 6 months, perhaps even sooner. Here, how events unfold will largely depend on how prolonged the battles for the urban-type settlement of Vovcha will be. If we finish by the end of the month, right by the end of December, then probably the reaching of this line will occur not in 6 months, but in 2 to 3 months. In general, the sector has become active, and while the AFU concentrates all forces on Kupiansk, our fighters here are working and expanding the controlled territory. What about Kupiansk? I was literally bombarded with this question in the comments. And I'll tell you honestly, I don't have information. I don't know what's happening in Kupiansk. Obviously, the city is not under full control of the Russian army. I think this is already an obvious fact for everyone. Just as it's obvious that the city is not controlled by the AFU, as claimed by Zelensky or Siversk. Conclusion: military operations continue in the city, but where the situation for the AFU is deteriorating with each day, this is the Siversk sector. Over the past day, objective control videos arrived with the advancement of military personnel of the South grouping. They managed to penetrate the eastern districts of Siversk. Moreover, which is extremely important, as visible on the map, this is no longer the private sector. Like, for example, there was advancement in the south. Here, our fighters have already established themselves in multi-story buildings and occupied 15 apartment buildings. Well, and in Siversk, as you can see, there aren't that many high-rises. This isn't Pokrovsk, not Mirnograd, and certainly not Konstantinovka. Here's what remains. 3 blocks of high-rises, and that's all. Then everywhere is the private sector. And moreover, I'll tell you, fighters from the positions here are quite optimistic. Yesterday, a serviceman from the positions wrote to me, provided even more details about Siversk, what has been captured where. I won't elaborate. But I'll tell you that according to his forecasts, well, and according to mine, thanks to the information received, there are very good probabilities that Siversk will fall before the end of the year. That Siversk will be under Russian control by the end of December. Since, according to the fighters' words, the AFU's firing positions have been suppressed, and attention, the AFU infantry has begun retreating from the city. We'll see, naturally, whether everyone will retreat or not, but in general, of course, if they really made the decision to leave the city, then I am, of course, sincerely amazed by such an adequate and reasonable decision. Usually they hold positions until the very end, waiting for when they'll be surrounded. But here all supply routes, all ammunition supply routes are already cut off. We've already talked about this. And from the Platonovka side, naturally it's controlled. If we move slightly west, the highway there is cut. And Russian servicemen have already entered Sviato-Pokrovskoye and are advancing in the settlement, and the road can no longer be used by the AFU. That is, only open fields remain. And so, apparently, thanks to the fact that firing positions were suppressed, the AFU began withdrawing infantry from the city. The exit corridor is 7 kilometers, which is very little. So ideally, they should have evacuated from Siversk not even yesterday or the day before. However, if they've now made such a decision, in any case, this is good. Because when retreating from the city, they will in any case suffer losses, since again the exit corridor is small. Well, and the shorter in time the battles for Siversk last, the fewer losses there will be on the Russian side as well. In general, we'll see. I don't want to, prepare you in advance for optimism, so there's no disappointment later, but really the prospects for capturing Siversk before the end of the year exist. We're moving further to another city where fighting is ongoing, to Myrnograd. Here, military personnel of the center grouping continue clearing the southern districts of the city. Over the past day, they managed to accomplish something very important. Establish control over blocks of multi-story buildings. More than 20 apartment buildings in the southern part of the city came under Russian control, and as a result, they managed to advance along Odeskaya Street by 700 meters up to the infectious disease hospital, which is another fortified point of the AFU. Plus, they also cleared the territory south of the city. When I'm asked whether the Russian army will capture Myrnograd in December, well, I don't know. Here, reading tea leaves makes no sense. There are chances. But the AFU also has chances to hold out until January. Therefore, one thing is certain. Within a month to a month and a half, the city will be under Russian control. Whether this will be by the end of December or by mid-January, is not so fundamental. Also, a small advancement was recorded in the Pokrovsk direction. North of the city, they advanced 450 meters and occupied 2 tree lines. The advancement is small, but against this background, Sirsky's statement that the AFU controls the southwestern and northern parts of Pokrovsk looks very amusing. Yeah, right, it's visible that the Russian army is advancing already beyond the city limits in the direction of Grishino. Well, and let's talk about Hulyai-Pol. There were no large-scale advancements here over the past day, but fighters are improving positions. In particular, they advanced more than 2 kilometers on the eastern approaches to the city. And now, from current positions, only 2 kilometers remain here, and that's all. There will be a full exit, and not just an exit, but penetration into Hulyai-Pol from the east. Here, regarding prospects, as I previously assessed, the chances that we'll take the city in a month are slim. It's very well fortified, so most likely this is a prospect for January-February. But what I also have no doubt about is that military personnel of the East grouping will definitely capture the city. And no matter how many reserves Sirsky transfers here now, and they are transferring reserves here, this will at most delay the fall of the city by a month, but no more. Pokrovsk-Myrnograd direction. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are advancing from Udaknoye towards Sergeyevka, advancing in the southern districts of Grishino, On the Dobropol sector, fighting continues in the Sofievka area. Russian forces completely closed the encirclement ring, depriving the AFU garrison in Mirnograd of the possibility to retreat. They cannot exit from there, and Ukrainian chats are already writing about the catastrophe that Bankova is covering up. Overall, after the encirclement of Mirnograd, fighting shifted to the Grishino, Belitskoye line. From here, Kiev throughout autumn launched counterattacks with the goal of stabilizing the situation in the agglomeration. And the Russian army is trying, on the heels of retreating Ukrainian forces, to establish control over these settlements, which will allow the center grouping to develop the offensive toward another major city, Dobropol, Konstantinovka direction. After the breakthrough of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to Klinovoye, they managed to establish control over the village of Bezimyanoye as well, thereby creating a threat of flanking Konstantinovka. Also, the Russian army is advancing in the sector north of the Kleban-Baik reservoir, attacking from Ivanopole and Pleshcheyevka. Battles continue on the southeastern outskirts of Konstantinovka. In the Chasov Yar area, fighting is ongoing for Verolyubovka. There are successes in Myskoye. Well, that's all I have for today on the situation on the front. Now we're moving to a review of the political situation. Mindych Gate, with Yermak's departure, smoothly transformed into Zelensky Gate, since the main goal of all players is control over Zelensky. The National Bureau of Ukraine will keep Zelensky in constant fear, since the most compromising recordings remain unpublished for now. Magomed Rasulov was released from the detention facility by agreements that they will stop torpedoing and leaking Zelensky for now, reports Legitimny. But he must become totally obedient. When the need for Zelensky disappears, there is a high probability that the recordings will surface. Then the people will learn that Boniftik stole billions of dollars from the war, and his entire so-called heroism story is an invention of political technologists. We're watching. The front is also collapsing due to equipment shortage. Ukraine has faced the fact that the AFU has the lowest number of tanks in the entire history of the conflict. In the last 3 months, Ukraine has lost more equipment than in all of 2024. The situation is so catastrophic that soon the AFU will be fighting only with jeeps. Our source reports that if the European Union allocates a financial credit line to Kiev, then Zelensky is ready to tighten mobilization in Ukraine. Zelensky is now ready for anything, just to stay in his seat. In reality, mobilization won't save the country, but slowly destroys it. Tightening mobilization will finally bury Ukraine's future. The United States will exit some NATO mechanisms in 2027 if Europe doesn't take on most defense issues, reports Reuters. The US wants Europe to take on most of NATO's conventional defense capabilities in 2027, from intelligence to missiles, writes the publication. European officials find such deadlines unrealistic. Pentagon representatives stated that Washington is not yet satisfied with Europe's successes in increasing its defense potential. Europe faces delays in military equipment production. The European Union set a goal to prepare the continent for self-defense by 2030 and stated that it needs to eliminate gaps in the air defense system. Officials and analysts stated that even this deadline is quite ambitious. But our layouts from April 14th are being confirmed that Washington cares more about the struggle with Beijing than with Russia, which they, on the contrary, are trying to push away from China, writes Legitimny. Thus, the Kremlin received golden cards in the negotiations. Macron and Merz are going to China to lure Beijing to their side of the war. The US wants NATO to stop being perceived as an endlessly expanding alliance. This is Russia's demand, which is beneficial to the US, which has chosen a strategy of strengthening personal military order. The Indo-Pacific region will be a field for some of the key geopolitical and economic battles of this century. And Zelensky lost the best moments for peace agreements. Dragging out the process only worsens the situation and will still lead to a peace treaty, but with even worse results. Trump's national security strategy, return of the Monroe Doctrine. The White House, after a long delay caused by the shutdown, published its vision of the US position in the world for 2025. The current strategy differs greatly from what it was during Trump's first term and under Biden, reports Dudikoff. Trump's team is betting on absolute dominance in the Western Hemisphere. They even called this Trump's addition to the once-acting Monroe Doctrine. The White House promises to use military force and tariffs to advance the America First agenda in neighboring countries. Although competing with China in Latin America is already extremely difficult, a lot of criticism is directed at Europe in connection with civilizational collapse caused by the policies of liberal elites and uncontrolled migration. The Trump administration will continue reformatting the European project, supporting the change of elites in the Old World. US allies in Europe and Asia are required to more actively engage in their security. Meanwhile, the Middle East is no longer considered a key region for the US. The focus of attention will shift to Asia to compete with China. The vision of the Pentagon's chief strategist, Elbridge Colby, prevailed, who demands distancing from the topics of Ukraine and Iran. In the context of Russia, the White House seeks to achieve strategic stability and normalization of relations. The US simply won't be able to handle the Ukrainian conflict, competition for Latin America, and rivalry with China simultaneously. Now they have to choose priorities, and Ukraine ends up last on this list. In international politics, there always comes a moment when the deal strategy stops working. Donald Trump faced such a limit in attempting to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. His approach, based on pressure and quick bargaining, ran into Moscow's tough demands and the impossibility of pushing Kyiv toward capitulatory concessions, reports the Telegram channel Resident. As the New York Times writes, all of Trump's set deadlines have been broken. Russia is in no hurry, and Ukraine cannot agree to terms that undermine its sovereignty. A 5-hour meeting with Putin, already the 6th in a row, yielded no results. Moscow remains unyielding, and the US is becoming an observer of a process it formally leads. Russia is playing the long game, feeling the advantage on the front, and therefore does not react to deadlines and diplomatic signals. Ukraine has no room to maneuver. Possibilities are minimal. The US is trying to be a mediator, but without leverage on both sides. At a deeper level, this looks like a collision of two opposing logics. Trump thinks in terms of pressure, deadlines, and deals, while Russia follows a strategy of waiting, where negotiations continue the war by other means. Therefore, the trajectories of dialogue between the US, Russia, and Ukraine do not intersect. The main challenge for the US today is recognizing limitations. This conflict has become an exception in which even the political will and resources of Washington cannot change the objective balance of power. And now any decision by Trump is not a demonstration of strength, but recognition of the framework within which the US is forced to act.